Hello, my name is Sophie Posey. I'm your usual French Venezuelan expat living in France. And today, instead of focusing on my music or my writing, which I usually do on my channels, I'm going to get a bit more personal here. I am actually an adopted child, born in Venezuela and adopted by French parents. So you'd think, oh, that seems swell. At first glance, you'd think I had a great life. My family was all right. Financial wise, they moved to the US around 1997 or so. I was born in 93, by the way. So they moved to Florida for my dad's job, and things seemed okay. I didn't want or lack for anything material wise. I got a nice dual education, a French education remotely and English education, in Florida. Everything seemed swell. Picture perfect. But then, the older I grew, the worse my parents' behavior became, especially my adopted mother. She could go from sweet and caring and benevolent to, one word, one trigger phrase, and she'd become this very dark, angry, hysterical person. My punishments would last for hours. I'd be locked in my room. I'd be even ignored at the dinner table, that sort of thing. She would pull my hair when she was angry, or she'd throw stuff at me like pillows, and all that. So the focus of this video isn't so much for abuse, although there was a lot of that. My father was an enabler. He wasn't often home, but she would call him and tell him, it was up to no good and whatever. And he'd sometimes yell at me on the phone, and sometimes I'd get another punishment in the evening, that sort of thing, when he came home. And it's just gonna get better. In order to wrap this up and get to the actual adoption part, I'm going to say that the story ended with me having to climb out my bedroom window back in December 2013 because they'd hijacked all my social media accounts. They kept me from physically going to college. They sent emails in my name to my professors saying that I was sick and I couldn't do my final exams, etc., etc. And yeah, it got really, really bad. I ended up having to escape and leave everything behind and start my life from scratch. So that was back in 2013, and I'm much better since. Now, here we get to the heart of the matter about adoption. I actually learned about my adoption when I was 11 years old, and my mother kept saying to this day, well, the last time I saw her, which was 10 years ago, I've been no contact since, she said that she never would have told me if I hadn't asked. So the discussion arose because kids at school were talking about where we were born, like what hospitals or whatever. And I didn't know that. So I asked my mom when I came back from school where I was born. She took this very, very serious face and she drugged me to the couch and sat me down and very all official-like said, oh, well, we have something to tell you. You're actually adopted. And I was like, oh, okay. So she went into this long, elaborate story about how my birth parents were very, very poor and lived in a Venezuelan barrio, and I was born a preemie, and I'd been taken to the hospital or whatever, and somehow like my parents died in the meantime or something in a mudslide, and so I was sent to the orphanage because obviously they were dead. And a couple years later, her and my dad came and saw me and fell in love immediately and took me in. So in short, that was what she said. And at the time, I distinctly remember asking, do you have any pictures of my parents or names? And she just said, no, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. And well, at the time, it kind of marked me a bit, but I was like, oh, well, but it doesn't matter. I felt loved. I was like, I'd been chosen and whatever. I didn't constantly think about it. I tended to forget. She was the one who kept bringing back up the adoption. She'd be like, if I was upset and crying, she'd say like, oh, well, I'm sure you're thinking about them. Well, you know what, you're better off being dead because you never have gotten a good life with them and they were poor and this and that. And she'd always bring up, the be grateful card. You should be grateful. Where would you be without us? You'd be a child prostitute on the streets. You wouldn't have gotten the education you've gotten, all the stuff you love, like writing, music, all that stuff. It wouldn't have happened, etc. So, yeah, I heard a lot of that about being grateful, and I think the trauma of that is starting to hit. So, I actually started looking for my birth certificate thanks to a family friend who had helped me out along the way for many years. She said, you have to look into your birth certificate, like your original birth certificate, not your French one. Although I did get that too because they never gave me a copy of my French birth certificate. So I reached out to like the French records, the Conseil National d'Adoption et des Origines or whatever. I think this was like back in 2019. And they said they had no records. They had 0 records of me in their files, which I thought was a little strange. So they told me to go to the Venezuelan authorities and ask them. Well, none of the emails worked, none of the phone numbers worked, nothing. Which is to be expected considering the state of the country. So looking through a French consulate and stuff, it gave me a list of lawyers who could help, and I found a very nice woman, Ms. Sarmiento, who helped me. We actually found a few things. We found the name of a hospital I was born in, and we found the Venezuelan birth certificate. Unfortunately, it has my adopted parents' names on it. It's not the actual original one. So she explained to me that Venezuelans back in the day when they were adopted, there was the original birth certificate with at least the mother's name on it. And it was like sealed up in a tribunal in a hall. And if everything was done properly and through proper channels, you could access that later, but it was sealed. The problem is, because I have, get this, I don't know the name of my birth mother. I don't know the date when the adoption was processed in Venezuela. I don't know the name of the adoption agency who took care of me. I don't know my birth name. I have no information. I can't do anything. I can't look through the hospital records. I can't have someone, even my lawyer, I can't have her look it up down there, or my cousins. I found bio cousins through DNA testing. I'll get into that a bit later. That was amazing. But anyway, they can't help because the hospital, the tribunals and stuff are like, we need a name, and I don't have anything. I don't even have a date. So in order to try and fix that, you know, I was going round and round and hitting dead ends in Venezuela, dead end after dead end after dead end. So I took up my lawyer's suggestion to reach out to my adopted parents, something which I was loath to do since I haven't been in contact with them for 10 years and I didn't want them to be involved in any way in my search. But, you know, I'm tired of wasting time and money, you know, because I don't have any information. And it is my legal right, Venezuelan and French birthright, to have information on my adoption. So back in March of this year, 2023, me and my lawyer had a friend in Florida, a colleague of hers, help draft up an official letter that we sent through the mail to their house 2 times. Actually, I think the first time was the first time was in March and the second time was in May. And then we sent a few emails like every other week to both their email addresses, including my dad's professional email. All of that can be found online, you know. And there's been no response, 0 response whatsoever, which has been very disappointing and very frustrating. Like, who do they think they are? It is not their information to keep. But considering that there's been suspiciously little information, they never told me anything, and just the way they acted very possessively and secretly, like even some of her close friends didn't find out about my adoption until much later. And my mom would always say, like, you know, don't tell anyone you're adopted, you know, and people will judge you, that sort of thing. And I'm like, why would people judge me for being adopted? That's kind of weird. The only ways I really kind of felt singled out for being adopted was when, you know, my own mother would say, you know, oh, well, you're not acting like her daughter, or my father would say the same thing, you know, act like her daughter and whatever, and that sort of thing. Or they'd say, you know, oh, you're a Caucasian, you're white, you know. You know, go, yes, I mean, I can pass for white, but I have Latina coloring as well, so that sort of thing. Little things like that. But anyway, so all this to say that I can't believe there's a big community out there of people like me, adoptees who've had very unfortunate experiences with their adopted families and who are now in the process of trying to search for their origins, or who have gone through that already. And I think it's intolerable, and it needs to be denounced, and it needs to be stopped. And so very quickly to end this video, so I ended up doing DNA testing back in 2019, I think, just to see if there was anybody out there, and there was nobody out there, just very distant, like fourth cousins, fifth cousins, that sort of thing. But back in 2020 or 2021, somewhere near the COVID era, I had a match, and she reached out to me. She was a second cousin. And since then, more of the family have done DNA tests, and they all pop up as second cousins, except for her mom, who shows up as her first cousin, and the sister of her mom, who shows up as her first cousin. So that has been amazing. The women all pretty much look like me. It's amazing. I never thought this would be possible. It was definitely a bright spot amidst all the turmoil of searching for my roots. And we Zoom and we Skype all the time. We message each other on WhatsApp and stuff. It's great. And we've been trying very much to help and find my origins. The thing is, our family tree is very complicated because we had grandparents, siblings marrying off with each other, and like my second cousin's grandfather had tons of kids, but like outside of his marriages as well. So there's all these nebulous other alternatives and stuff. That makes it very, very hard through just DNA testing alone, to find my birth parents. Because at this point, if everything else being a lie, there was no mudslide back in 93 when I was born. That was way later. Considering how chronically my mom lied about other things, who knows if my birth parents are even dead at this point? We don't know. But in any case, I think it is my right to know for my health. As I get older, I probably want to know what my health issues might be, if I have any, and just to have a name. It's nice to know where I fit in the family tree, and if I ever do want to start contact one day, I might not, but who knows? It is my right to do so. Anyway, thanks for listening to my story. It's a way longer than I thought it would be, but here we go. I've been holding this in for many, many years, and I think it's important, and it isn't something to be ashamed of, because I kind of felt ashamed. I was like, oh, I'm disgracing my Venezuelan roots. Spanish is only my third language, and I feel kind of awkward and stuff with my cousins when we talk, but not because of them. They always make me feel welcome. It's me, my own fears. So yeah, I'm just putting my story out there, and looking forward to connecting with other adoptees who may have been in the same situation or whatever, and I'm cheering you guys on and hoping you get to recover from what happened to you, and you get the answers that you need, and send some positive thoughts my way as well. And I'm going to try and do everything I can to get to the bottom of this and get to my roots and get my documents. And if that means taking my parents to court, then I will do so. I really hate having to do it. It's stupid to have to come to that, but they leave me no other choice. Anyway, bye-bye, and thanks for listening.